With just a few days left until the election, more and more voters are making their final decisions. According to Emerson College polling, the candidates are neck and neck, each polling at 49% nationally. But the election will likely come down to just a handful of swing states. Joining us now to break down the latest numbers, Senior Director of Emerson College Polling, Matt Taglia. Matt, thanks for joining us. Starting off with your polling out of the swing state of Michigan, right now you have Trump leading Harris by 1 point, 49% to 48%. Compare that to just a few weeks ago when Harris held a 2-point lead. Where is Trump picking up that support?
Yeah, so like you said, we see Trump at 49%, Harris at 48%. We don't really see that 1-point lead changing much after we push undecided voters to choose one of the candidates. So we're seeing an independent split here among these independent voters. Trump slightly winning these voters, 47 to 45. That's not much of a change since September when it was very evenly split, about 45 to 45. So what I think we're seeing is some small slippage overall among various demographics for Harris. And, if we look at Hispanic voters, there is certainly a bit of slippage there. They are nearly tied. They won't make up a sizable portion of the electorate here, but that is still one group that she's going to depend on when margins are so tight. The good news, I think, for her is that the early vote is very good in her favor, 60% versus 40%, according to our data. Will that be enough on election day? We just don't know.
I want to ask you about the Senate race in Michigan. Democrat Alyssa Slotkin leads Republican Mike Rogers by 2 points in your poll. What issues are driving voters to do some split ticket there? That's not something you usually see when it comes to statewide races and presidential races.
Yeah, we really see Slotkin overperforming compared to Harris here, 48% versus Rogers, 46%. And it might be better to phrase that as Rogers is really underperforming Trump. We also see a higher share of undecided voters here, 6%. That's much higher than in the presidential race. And we see independents are breaking for Slotkin by 10 points. That's pretty sizable. And that is very different from the presidential race in Michigan, where independents are split. And when we look at these voters, we see that the economy is, of course, a top issue, 48% among independents. Threats to democracy, though, comes in at second place with 12%, and immigration there with 10%. So you can kind of see how some of these independent voters may prefer a Trump approach to some of these issues, the economy and immigration, those being winning issues for Donald Trump across the swing states. Rogers is possibly just not able to speak to these voters and these issues that these voters care about in the same way that Trump is.
Shifting gears to a couple tight congressional races in New York. In the 17th district, Democrat Mondaire Jones is looking to unseat Republican Mike Lawler. Your polling shows Lawler is leading right now, 49% to 44%, but 7% say they're still undecided. Do we have any indication about how those undecided voters are leaning?
We can take some cues from this poll. We see Lawler at 49%, Jones at 44%, and that's 7% undecided. Now that is for the Democrat, Jones, they're lagging Harris, who's able to get 50% in the district. And frankly, Lawler is the better known of the two and better liked. Jones has an issue here. 35% have a very unfavorable rating of him. That's a tough pill to swallow if you're Jones, and that's going to be potentially insurmountable in the electorate come election day.
In neighboring 18th district, also in New York, a similar story, but in the other direction. Incumbent Democrat Pat Ryan is leading Republican challenger Allison Esposito by nearly 10 points, but again, 7% say they're undecided. This is a seat that Republicans were looking to pick up. Is that still possible?
Yeah, and again, I think it's most helpful to look at some of these favorability ratings when we look at these undecided voters, because there are 7%. That's high compared to the presidential election, but in reality, that's not a whole lot of folks in this district that are undecided. But we can see that Esposito has a name ID problem. 17% can't rate them one way or another. That's really tough. We also see Ryan with 51%. I think that's a pretty important number. Just winning a majority in the district. That's just going to be really, really hard to overcome when there's such a gap of 9 points. So no, I think Republicans winning the seat, that's going to be really tough, despite the fact that Trump leads by 1 point in the presidential race in this district.
All right, that's all I got. Matt Taglia, Emerson College Polling. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
With Election Day nearly here, News Nation gave voters the chance to discuss the races and issues that matter most to them in a special town hall hosted by Chris Cuomo. Some of the country's big political hitters showed up to give their takes, including ESPN host Stephen A. Smith, billionaire Mark Cuban, UFC CEO Dana White, former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, and former presidential candidate RFK Jr. Take a look.
We have something very different tonight here at News Nation. We invited left, right, reasonable, Republicans, Democrats, independents. They're all here and well filled out. I have co-hosts Bill O'Reilly and Stephen A. Smith.
Respectfully, know who you're talking to and know what you're talking about when you ask that question.
We got Mark Cuban, Sarah Palin, Dana White.
What has she done over the last 4 years? And you cannot make the excuse that she was the vice president and she wasn't in charge of anything. I think that's ridiculous.
Geraldo, Bobby Kennedy Jr., Congressman Ro Khanna, Congressman Jared Moskowitz.
You want to know what the biggest mistake Kamala Harris made in the whole campaign? On The View, they asked her a very simple question. Is there anything you would have done differently in 4 years? Can't think of anything. Hey, I got 50.
What if she had done that? You know what they would have said? You betrayed us.
We produce more energy than we ever have. We produce
In
more
the
energy now
latter
than
part, when they started to panic, not in the beginning.
Billy, look it up. Do you know how to use Google?
I believe that polls are really good for strippers and cross-country skiers, but not for a whole lot of other things.
Democrats have been very effective saying to women, American women, that the government has no right to interfere with your body. That's the mantra, right?
Okay.
Isn't there another body involved
Amen.
here?
I am a frightened American who knocks on doors every day, all day, in the most significant counties in this country, in Philadelphia. And everyone goes like, I don't know. I'm scared.
President Trump has asked me to reorganize the federal health agencies, the agencies that have a portfolio that affects human health, which is CDC, NIH, FDA, as well as some of the agencies within the United States Department of Agriculture.
You're being beaten over the head with a very simple proposition. Who and what is worse? I have two overarching concerns, as I see it, all right? Why are we where we are? And then how do we get somewhere better?
You had your say. Now I'm going to tell you what happened. I don't care whether you believe it or not.
He's been talking that way to me for 21 years.
And it still hasn't gotten through.
Is there anything that all your guests could agree on? And you each have 5 seconds now to answer.
That Cuomo did a good job moderating.
Oh, amen.
Decorum and decency towards our fellow men and women is an absolute must if we are going to prosper as a nation.
Despite its flaws, this is the greatest country in the world.
Amen.
Washington Post subscribers are jumping ship. The publication has now lost over 250,000 subscribers following its decision not to endorse a presidential candidate. Roughly 10% of the newspaper's digital following canceled their subscriptions since last Friday, when owner Jeff Bezos ended a decades-long tradition of endorsing a presidential candidate. 3 of the paper's 10-person editorial board stepped down, announcing they will remain at the paper in other roles. The editor-at-large also resigned in protest, while over 21 opinion section columnists signed a statement condemning Bezos' decision. The Washington Post has not confirmed the number of cancellations officially, though an article published in the newspaper cited documents and 2 unnamed sources confirming the figures. The Los Angeles Times also experienced a similar number of subscription cancellations over its decision not to support a candidate. While all eyes are on the swing states, Nebraska and its 5 electoral votes could hold more influence than in past elections. News Nation's Blake Berman breaks down the electoral math in today's Political Minute.
Could the road to 270 go through Nebraska? I'm Blake Berman with News Nation. Nebraska is one of 2 states in this country that divides up some of its electoral college votes by congressional district. And this year, many eyes are on Nebraska's 2nd district. That's Omaha and the surrounding suburbs, which has 1 electoral vote. Now, the district is represented currently by a Republican who is up for re-election this year. Vice President Harris is up by 12 points in that district. That's according to a recent New York Times poll. Now, here's how the district could factor into the presidential race. There are several scenarios where the presidential election could end up in a 269 tie. Here's one of them right here. And then we switch to the other. You can see a little bit of change in the map. In any of the scenarios, 1 electoral vote in the election could make the difference between a win and a tie for either candidate. I'm Blake Berman, and this is the News Nation Political Minute.
You can find more news and analysis from Blake and our colleagues 24/7 on News Nation. To find News Nation on your screen, go to joinnn.com. The Los Angeles Dodgers have won the World Series, clinching victory against the New York Yankees after a wild Game 5 comeback. The win marks the Dodgers' 8th World Series title in franchise history. It's their first World Series title since 2020 and first in a full season since 1988. The Dodgers will celebrate their win with fans tomorrow during a championship parade that will run through downtown LA. And that's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.